Hello, let's explore the logging portion of the starter framework. Starter framework was conceived and designed by Bill Coulam. This project is available in GitHub. He is the creator. This is very well done. We are going to be exploring the logging portion. It is one of the portions that the starter framework allow us to do. So let's first see how we have to set it up so that we can use the logging framework. So to use the logging framework, first you have to configure it, give some information to some of the tables so that it will be able to provide you with meaningful information. The first table that we are looking at is the app table. In here, we define the application that we are going to be using the logging framework for, right? So the first three app IDs, 1, 2, 3, they came with the starter framework, and we left it so that we can use them as a template. The 4 and 5 are the ones that we created. 4 is for e-commerce and 5 is for virtual trade show. So let's remember the number 4. Okay, the next table that we are looking at is the app DB, right? So here we define in what instances this application is going to be running on, right? So we define the database instances. So we define all the instances here. So just in case if we refresh one over the other, you still have these instances defined. That's why you see, even though we are on development instance, you see D1, T1 and production all in here. So 1 is D1, 2 is ecom T1, and 3 is ecom P. The next is the environment. So this is where we associate the application to the instances and the account. The account meaning the account that is going to hold your code and access the code. So we are after in application ID 4, and we are on DBID 1, which is the development instance. So we have the owner and the access accounts defined here, right? So the SVC ecom admin for 4 is for doing maintenance on items, customers, and stuff like that. The SVC express is where the customer logs in to place orders, and SVC PPS is where how we fulfill orders. We have a handheld. Using the handheld, we go do the selection, do the QC process, like finalize the order, like confirm with the payment center to get our payment, and then talk to FedEx or UPS for shipment. So that's done. That's all done in the handheld. Okay, the parameters, right? So what are the parameters involved? So there are lots of parameters for different purposes. So LDAP, if there is an app server, what app server you're using, the if the timeout for the client request, IO, where do you want to write the file, what is the default file name, do you want to write the log to a directory, log into a file, and if so, which directory, and then emails, where it needs to be stored. If there is a directory you need to store into, and then the targets, log targets, right? This is number 8. Please remember this one as well. So the default log targets are like, how do you want to present your log message, right? That's what this means. 9 is debug, whether you want to turn the debug on or off. There are multiple options there. And then the debug toggle check interval, right? Like how long do you want to leave the debug on and stuff like that. And the archive directory, once you want, where you want to move the log files. uh, so again, default email targets, these are self-explanatory. So how long you want to keep the log and the host of the SMTP server, right? And then now you have the parameters, you have the environment. Now you are going to say, like, if you remember, the environment is where you associated the application to the instance and the accounts, right? That creates an environment. And now you're saying for that environment, what are my parameter settings? So I just randomly picked the one environment with these different palms. I asked you to remember like palm number 8, which is where the logs are being written to. So screen is Y, meaning I want to write the log messages on the console. Table, yes, I want the log messages to be written onto into a table. And then 3 is file. I don't want to be written into a file. I don't want log messages in a file, right? File is equal to no. And then the debug, whether you are going to turn it on or off, right? That is on or off. The default is off. You can update this table to change that behavior, right? Remember 8, we'll be talking about it later. Okay, then this is the table where those log messages are returned to, right? So you have the log ID, which is a unique ID, the application ID, which is ecom for our purpose for this demo, which is the application e-commerce we are going to be using today, and the time stamp, the time it happened, the severity code. So this is something that we will be looking more deeply. And message code, there is one little thing that we will be looking into. The routine name is cool thing. This tells you which procedure or which function or the procedure or function in the package where this log message is coming from. The line number, where it happened, the text, what is being written, the client ID, where it started, right? You can we will see all these, right? Like the client IP address, the host server IP address or the host name, the operating system user, and then this is like a CLOB field to store additional information, and then the call stack, right? So this is okay. Here we are picking ordering by log timestamp descending and just fetching the first 5 rows. So this is like, since I don't have any condition, I am just looking into the table, and it is somebody is working at this time 11 p.m. like maybe 5-6 minutes before. This is for app ID 5, which is VTS. If you see the routine name, so this is the routine name, right? The VTS package is the package name, and this is the procedure or function thereafter. And this information, so this is the severity code, CV code information. It's a deliberate information. It comes from line number 207, and it's about the runtime, like how long it took, right, to run this procedure. We will see all these. And the application ID they have given as Draco. Here it is VTS, here it is Draco, here VTS. So these are the different IDs they are giving: the IP address, Apple ID, the host user, OS user. I think this is coming from a web application server. So this is probably a container or something. So that's what the last 5 records here is telling us, right? Next set of 5 we are going to look into is, we are going after the same table, but this time we are looking into severity code error, right? We are looking just for errors that happened, and we are also saying I don't want anything that says Jira, right? Message code, I don't want anything that is Jira. We will look into this as well. And once again we are getting the last ordering by log timestamp and just fetching the first 5 rows, right? So if you see, it's information severity code is error, message code is error message, and the package it happened is website pk.getConfig. So application ID is 4, which is e-commerce, and there is no data found, right? So this no data found, it's because somebody did not set the context. The user is Jay Murray, so he is using it without setting the context. That's why you're getting this error, right? And this one came from an anonymous blog, and again a no data found. So these are the different errors, right? The next one is we are just after message code Jira. So in e-commerce, what we have done is this app log table is being monitored by Splunk, right? Splunk is a log reader, right? It collects all the information. Whenever it sees in the message code the word Jira, it calls the API to go create a ticket for a particular group that we already have defined. So we work with the architecture support team to read the logs, right? So you can go into Splunk, look for e-commerce, all app log table right there in the Splunk with the powerful search of Splunk, right? Apart from that, if you what Jira or Splunk helps us with is whenever it sees the message code Jira, it'll send a notification or call the API to create a Jira ticket for us. And that Jira ticket will come to us, so it is more an alert saying, okay, something bad has happened or something that we need to look into immediately, right? Okay, so right now we look into the different logging types. We already saw the first one we saw is like we picked randomly the last most recently written last 5 messages, which were all information, and then we said, okay, I want only error messages where the message code is not Jira. And the third one is I want message code equals Jira, right? So these are the different ways of logging, and we will see them in detail now. So whenever we are going to use the logging, we have to initialize the environment, right? We have to prep the environment, like what it needs to be warmed up. Without that, if you remember in the error messages, we saw no data found, right? That's what happens. It does not know what application you are using the logging for. It does not it does not have certain information. Without that, it cannot write into the log table. That's why we initialize the environment, right? So how do I initialize the environment, right? There are a couple of ways to initialize the environment. The proper way is to do env. This is again a framework package, env.init client context, right? I'm initializing the client context. So I provide a client ID. If you see, the client ID and the app ID are bind variables, right? So the client ID, I'm giving some kind of a unique word, and app ID I'm going to I have been providing as ecom, because that's what I'm going to go after in this video. The client IP is I'm getting it from the context, this system context user environment for IP address. The client host, again the host from the user environment, OS user from the user environment from the sys context, right? So we are getting all these from the sys context. The only 2 things that we are providing is app ID for this video. The whole session is going to be ecom. That is set in the bind variable. The client ID is going to be changing when each time we initialize it, and we will see the client ID as we look into the log table, right? So we initialize the context. So this is like a warming up the logging. Once we warm up the logging, the next thing is this is the code that we are going to be running, and we are going to see what happened, right? So we have like a logs package in the framework, and we have different types, right? That's what we said, like we are going to see different types, right? So debug is one type, warning is another type, information is another type, error and error for Jira, right? So error and error for Jira, the severity code is error, but the message code is what is going to be different between these two. So in the error J, the message code is going to be Jira, all right? So if you remember, the debug was turned off in the parameter, right? So it is turned off. Take my word for it for now. So the debug is turned off, but the warning. So we give some kind of a title or a message header or whatever you want to call, and then the message you want to go. So we will see the signature for this a little later. But when it comes to error and error for Jira, it automatically raises the exception. So in this scenario, I don't want it to raise an exception. So I said, don't re-raise. So I set it to false, so it does not raise, right? So when I run this, if you remember, I asked you to look into palm number 8, where the screen equals y was set, right? Screen equals to y. What it does is, it writes it to the console. It writes the message to the console. What message is it writing? The logs.debug, whatever is going to go into the table, it because the table is also equal to y, it also puts it on the screen, right? So it puts them on the screen, as well as it writes it to the table. The file was set to no, so it's not writing to a file. Now, once you are done with your work, you clean up. You do the cleanup. You reset the context, right? You clean up so that any subsequent things that you are going to do does not use the context that you set. Once you clear up, now we are going to see, okay, remember I said I assign a client ID to this when I initialize. So I'm only trying to fetch the client ID, like if it is not null, because we have set it is not null. So we are going to go after that particular client ID. We'll see what client ID it is, right? I'm going to fetch the first 5 rows. Okay, so here is the log table. So if you remember, I had debug, warning, information, error and error J, right? So since we are going log timestamp descending, warning comes first because that's the debug. Since the flag was turned on, you don't see any debug. Warning comes first, information comes next, error comes third, and Jira comes fourth. So the severity code is error here, info and warn, and you don't see a debug. And the only difference between these two errors is the message code is Jira, right? And then we talked about the client IP. So it got the client IP from the context. It got the client host from the context, and the client OS user from the context, right? So all these, it got it from the context. And then I assigned client ID, and I assigned it as log1, right? If you see log1, 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 right? That's the client ID I assigned to. The other one I assigned is ecom. If you remember e-commerce, the app ID is 4. 4, 4, 4, 4. And the message, right? So I said, okay, this is the text I want. If you remember the lval, I put as test. In information, you will see it in a different place. And warning, I didn't have any message. There is no value if you remember the signature, right? Okay. Next, we know we have the debug as the very first line, but it did not do anything. So let's try the debug for now. We have to set the environment again because we have reset it. We set it with the app ID and the client ID. Before going there, let me show you in PLSQL developer. Maybe it's much clearer here. Okay, so these are the log IDs, the app IDs, the timestamp. So if again it's log timestamp descending. So warning, information, error and error, warning message, info message, error message, and Jira message, right? And so this, because we are running an anonymous block, it says anonymous block. But if you have, as I showed you initially, BTS package and website package, it will give you the exact package and procedure name if it is a compiled one. So in the information, the routine name becomes the value, but otherwise that log text becomes the message that you are passing, right? And whatever line number that you have this on. And the client ID, as I said, I assign it as log1. Client IP is from the context. Client host is from the context. Client OS user is from the context. And extra is, we did not do anything, so it's just empty, right? And the client stack or the contact call stack. So this will give you where it started, right? So it started line number 8 in the anonymous block, and then it went to the a logs package where it hit line number 1278, and then it went to the logs package to get call stack to line number 98, right? So that's the call stack. Again, back here, we are, just to remind you all again, we are going to set the debug on, because we have the debug as the very first statement and it did not do anything. It's a conditional compilation, right? That's why it did not do anything. And we initialize the environment first, as usual for debugging. Once we initialize it, how do we turn the debug, right? There are two ways to turn the debug on. So it is the same set debug package. It's overloaded, one with the boolean and one with the varchar, right? With the varchar, you have a lot more options, but those options does not make sense when you're running it from SQL Plus because you have a direct connection. It makes more sense when you're in a connection pool environment or like non-SQL Plus, non-PLSQL environment, where you could say, okay, I want to monitor this particular session or this particular unit of work or this particular user, right? Or you can say all these means turn it on, debug on. All on, y, yes, true, all, like these are all string. If you say any of these, it will turn it on. And if you say any of none, off, and no, false, this will turn it off, right? That's turning on or off on the debug, right? So in our case, set debug is good, right? Good enough. So we are going to set the debug to true. And then it's the exact same code. If you remember, one of the call stack we looked into is the line number 8 where it started. That's the RJ. If you remember here, it's at line number 8, anonymous block. So that's that. So since it's the exact same code, still it is on line number 8, right? So here we again, it's the exact same code. Nothing has changed. The lval is set to test. Lval, and lval, right? So, okay, warning has a lval, so I messed on that. Where is the test in the warning? Maybe it is in the extra. Yes, it is in the extra. Okay, so for warning, puts it in the extra. All right. Now running this. So once we run it, we set the debug back to false and reset clear the context. And now we go back and say, okay, I have initialized with the client ID. Fetch me the 5 rows and tell me from the last and tell me what they are, right? So if you see now the client ID is log2, 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 log2. Oh, it's 5 times now as opposed to 4 times last time, right? So what is the 5th one? Debug. So since we turned on the debug, the debug message is here, right? So let's put 2 here. Oh, maybe I had run it earlier. Maybe I should look at the timestamps. Yeah, it looks like I had run it one time around 11:15. No, that's log 1. Why is log 1 showing up? Yeah, log 1 showing up when I say client ID is equal to log 2. Oh, R. That's what. That's what is it. Sorry. Okay. I want only client ID log 2, right? Now it's all log 2. The rest, you know about the rest. It's the same thing. Okay. The club is empty for the debug and the routine name goes as test. Okay. That's the debug. All right. Now let's look into the signatures, right? So now we know there is a debug, there is a warning, information, error, and error Jira, right? If let's look at the signature. So the procedure is overloaded and we have 3 different choices, right, for the same debug. And if you see, the default is null for 3 of those in the very first signature, in 1 of those in the second one, and none in the third, right? So if you call the debug just with the message, that's what I think we did here. We did not pass a routine name, we did not pass the line number. So routine name, it will be automatically determined for you. If you read this will be determined automatically for you. Only pass this if you want to record a source name different than what the call stack says. If you do pass this in, it is usually the package.routine where the message came from. Could be the name of a trigger, object method, type, body, etc., right? And the line number, this will be determined automatically for you. Only pass this in if you want to record a line number for the debug message. That is different from the line on which logs.debug is being called, right? So that's why these two do not have it, because it can figure it out where what the routine is and what the line numbers are, right? It can figure those out. And we will see the variations. I think we will be using primarily this one. This one was developed internally. I think these two were developed by the framework was extended with these 2 additional things. You will see the benefits of using this one. The next one is information, right? Information is, again, it has 3 different variations. Just with the message, with these can be inferred. Again, the same thing for routine name and line number. These can be inferred. You can just say information and pass a message, or you can this is something we developed. You can add this. You'll see the usage of this, or you can it is the same thing between these two. Here you don't have the tar palm. Here you have the tar palm, right? And in here the club is null. We'll show you an usage for this one. The warning has only 2 signatures. One is with, as usual, with the routine name and the line number. Oh, both have the routine and name and line number, which is again can be inferred. The one other thing is, this is something that we added, which is the IAR parm, right? Otherwise it's the same. Error message has 4 different signatures. So for the first one, you don't have to pass anything. You can just say error, which has all the defaults. It'll, by default, if you see, it'll all raise is true, raise is true, raise is true, and on all those. So the first signature, you don't do anything, just call error. The second one, you can give a message. The rest are all, you can use the default. The third one, this is something we added, which is IAR parm. Again, this is what we frequently use with the message. And The fourth one is again with IARPOM without message, right? So these are again, this is something we added, these two, right? And the Jira, right? This is again, we added this to automate the ticketing process. This is exactly the error message, the previous procedure you saw. Only thing is the message code is of type Jira, nothing other fancy, right? It's exactly same thing. All the signatures, everything is same as error. Okay, let us see this in action. Okay, the first thing now you all would be familiar is, oh, when I'm going to use the logging framework, I need to initialize it. Let me initialize it. Let me warm it up. Okay, once I warm it up, here we are going to, this is again, this may get confusing, but I want you guys to stay with me here. This is a procedure that we are going to be calling, right? A procedure that we are going to be calling. The one mistake, I don't know if it is a mistake or not. The one thing that I did is, I am again going after the framework table, right? I'm going after the app log table. So we should not confuse with the messages that we log, right? So I'm going to show you that how we are going to log the messages. Like if you remember, we do logs.debug, logs.warn, logs.info, logs.err, logs.rj, right? Again, we are going to be doing that here, but how do we do it in a procedure, right? Like in one of our procedures, how or what we normally do, right? So normally it will be some other cursor, like you'll be going after a customer table, item table, or a combination of those, or orders or something. Here I'm going after the app log table. So it probably may get confusing, but don't worry about it. So we have, so again, this is some convention we have been following for the last 15 some years. If you see I underscore, it's an in parameter, right? If you see O underscore, it's an out parameter. If you see IO underscore, it's an in out parameter, right? So this has been very helpful for us. So we have been following this blindly, because when I have to assign to a parameter here, if it is P underscore, I need to go check, oh, is it either an in out parameter or is an out parameter? Can I assign it? All those, right? So by naming, we know, okay, this is an in parameter, I cannot assign something. It's an out parameter, I can assign something. It's an in out parameter, yes, I can assign something, right? So these are some conventions we have been following for a long time. And LC, you'll be seeing all these, right? LC is local constant, GC is global constant, LTT is local table type, LRT is local record type. So all these different kind of things, right? And this is from the framework package. Again, this is this may be weird. In most of the, like, since the last 5-6 years, there has been a shift in the development where we have the schema name before the package name to qualify it. Before that, we never were qualifying the schema name because they all had public synonyms. That's why if the framework has public synonym, that's why you will not, you'll sometimes see me do framework dot, sometimes you would not see me here. Like if you see here, all these places, I'm not doing framework dot because it has a public synonym. So this one is from the framework package, like type tmax fknum. So we are assigning the procedure name. If it is a package or procedure, you put the package name dot procedure name, right? And assign it to this. And then this is a table type, right? This is of logs.tarpom, right? It is a table type. So what we are doing is, we are saying, okay, I'm going to add all these parameters, right? All these in parameters. There is nothing for the out parameter, right? You can, in out parameter may have something, but out parameters does not have anything. So all these in parameters I'm going to be adding to the yeah, LTT pumps, right? This is the LTT pump. So this is like key value pair. IAP ID, IAP ID. So you can make it more in English, right? Like you can say application ID, severity code, message code, whatever. This is just a string. So this is a key and this is the value, right? So this is to see what value was passed for me to execute my action, and if there is something wrong in the value, that's why this did not work. So I need to either change my code or I have to prevent them from sending that. So that's why we are gathering the in parameters, right? In parameters are mostly, it's not controllable, it's coming from outside. we all we are 90 some percent of the time we don't want to do the logs.info. This is for this demonstration purpose. I have this logs.info. 90% of the times we just say logs.debug. If you remember, logs.debug will log into the table or onto the screen only if debug is turned on. I don't want these parameters to be logging into the table unless there is an error. If there is an error, I'm saying log it, right? If there is not an error, just hold on to it. And if there is a need for me to debug, I'll turn the debug on and I'll walk through those, right? So that's why I don't want to write these into the table. So most likely this, again, I have this just for the demonstration purpose, but in most of the procedures, 90% of the procedures, you will see only logs.debug. There are places where we want to capture it for some auditing or some recording purpose. We do that. Otherwise, we don't want to do it. And the other one you will see is, again, this is a framework feature. We start the timer and we end the timer. Start the timer, end the timer. And if you have anything that is long running, you can change this to from logs.debug to logs.info. So you will know this procedure is taking this much time to run, right? So in here, if you see, I have app ID default to 4 and message code default to Jira, right? The rest of the parameters I have is null. Everything is null. So nothing will be logged except for these two parameters, app ID and message code. And if you see, the way I'm calling is get app log with no parameters. It's just the out parameter, right? And this is a bind variable, right? I'm getting the cursor result in a bind variable. What am I doing? I'm saying if app ID is null or if app ID is this. If severity code is null or severity code is this. So it is, again, based on the input parameters, it's going to generate the result. And again, if you see, there is no order by. So it is going to go to the first block it is seeing, take the first block into the memory and walk through the first 5 rows in that block and print that, and give it back to you, right? And then once it comes to the memory and it is fetched into the OLS, all we are going to do is use print it. We are just going to print it. So it could be any message. It is going to find first, and that block is going to it is going to walk through that block and fetch the first 5 rows. That's all. Hope this is clear. Okay, so we print the result. Okay, for some reason it doesn't want to help printing the result. You can see the cursor moving. It's, for some reason it's invisible. I don't know why. I saw some thing being printed. So it is printing. Okay, so yeah, as you can see, it is printing, but it should be much clearer than this. Okay, so we printed the result that we got in the bind variable. But the point is not about printing it on the screen, right? Printing this on the screen. It is more about using the uh, logging mechanism. So if you remember, we added the parameters into the POM, add POM, and then once we added it, like with the key value, once we added it, we had the logs.info. For the timer, we did not change it to info. It was still in debug, but for this one, it was logs.info to log the messages. So that's what we are after, right? So let's reset the client context. Once we reset it, now let's go after this particular client ID and see. Okay, so this is log 8, and if you remember, the message code is Jira and app ID 4, so we were using the defaults, the rest are all null. And let's look at number 8. So app ID 4, log timestamp information, because we said we want it as an information instead of debug. Client ID we provided as 8, client IP, host, user, and then what happened to the parameters? It's showing up here, right? That's in our extra. So that's the key value, right? You could have just said application ID, whatever you want, severity code, message code. So it's more a key value pair of what we pass. Like, so these are all the input parameters with the values that was passed. So that's number. That's how we use it in a procedure or a function, right? But remember, we have the logging of the timing on the top and the bottom. We turn the ton into info if something is long running and we want to monitor it. But the parameters is typically debug unless there is something that you want to watch for, right? Okay, now for the same procedure, let's turn on the debug so that we can see the time, right? Runtime. So again, we initialize the context with a new client ID and same application ID. We set the debug to true, and it's the exact same procedure, no change. The one thing that I am doing here is I'm saying message code is null. Message code is null, meaning I'm not after Jira. So it can be any message it's going to hit, and I'm going to get that in the old list and print that to the screen. Maybe we will see it on the screen, maybe we wouldn't, but it's not this action we are after. Again, this is just going to the framework table, bringing the first 5 rows, matching these conditions, right? Matching these conditions, meaning I'm only after app ID 4. The rest are all null. I'm not after this action. I'm after more of this action. I have logs.info here for the parameters and the logs.debug for the timer. Since I turned on the debugger, I'm expecting the runtime stamp to show as in the log table. Okay, now that it completed, this is the debug. If you see, it is the debug message with the runtime 0 seconds. So it's saying to run this cursor, it took from the start to the stop the runtime. If you see, this is the text, so it says runtime is 0 seconds, right? And again, yeah, this is the oldest that's being printed on the screen. It's not showing up. It is there, but it's printing everywhere. Maybe I need to do some formatting or something that I'm not sure about, but I'm not worried about this one. Okay, now that the printing is over, we set the debug to false, reset that context, and we are after the last client, which is client ID 9, right? So if you see, it has information as one entry and debug as another. In the debug, it has the runtime of 0 seconds, and for the information, we log the parameters and message code is null. All we have is app ID 4. for log 9, you have the debug and the information for that, and it says runtime is 0 seconds, and again the information that we are after is the parameters, and if you see, all of them are null except for the app ID. All right, now let's see some variations in parameters, right? Like again, this is more showcasing that different kind of parameters can be logged. That's all, nothing more than that, right? So what do I mean by different kinds of parameters? So far I have been giving the default parameter to be logged, which is, we saw an integer as well as a string. The Jira is the string and 4 is the number. And here, okay, I'm passing a string, right? I'm looking for client OS user AS Rajaji. And also I am saying message code is null, meaning I don't want Jira, but I want the app ID to be 4. And let's run this. Again, the printing is a mess. Please forgive me on that. Okay, it finished printing, and we are resetting the context. Now we are after the latest client ID, right? So the latest client ID is 10, and it is just the information, and the parameters are the OS user and the app ID. OS user ID and the app ID, right? So if I pass in 10, again you see that, right? Same thing. All right, let's move on. Now we are going to look for the timestamp. So we initialize the context. It's the exact same procedure, no change. Only thing is the message code is null. We are saying from timestamp is, I want the last 1 hour result, right? Like I'm after the last 1 hour. So from timestamp is null, or log timestamp greater than or equal to the from timestamp, which is current timestamp minus 1 hour. Current times. Yeah, this is meaning I want the last 1 hour, right? And we are going to log that and see the timestamp being handled. Again, I think we added the timestamp logging to the framework. It did not come along with it. So we kind of forked the code to have all these additional parameters, some of these additional parameters, not all. Okay, now printing is going to be a mess. Sorry about that. Okay, finish printing. Reset the client. Now we are after the latest client, probably log 11. Yes, it is log 11, and you see the timestamp being logged. So after client ID 11, okay, again the same thing with log timestamp, from timestamp logged, right? Move on. Okay, so now we have seen a debug message, how we turned on the debug message when we wanted to, and we also saw information message. Let us see like how do we provide a warning message, right? Again, warning is going to be logged as well. So how do we provide that? So we initialize the context here as usual. Okay, this is a different procedure called divide and rule. In this, we pass numerator and the denominator and return the result, which is a number. So what we do is we use another feature of framework, which is the assertion. So we check for null. If any of these values are null, we say, oh, this is a user defined exception, provide me a valid number, right? But we don't check for other things. All we are checking is not null. It could be, you could pass me an alphabet and I'm going to raise an exception here, but I'm checking not null for a user defined exception. Okay, but this is more for the warning, right? So if my denominator is 0, provide me a warning, right? Say logs.warn is divide by 0 is not allowed. Otherwise, just print the result for me, output, right? It's a simple one, right? It's doing a dbms output, and we are going I will be 1, the first one will be 0, and this one will be 4. So the numerator is going down, meaning it's going increasing from 0 to 4, and the denominator is decreasing from 4 to 0, right? It's a simple loop, right? Okay, so if you see 0 by 4 is 0, 1 by 3 is 0.3, 2 by 2 is 1, 3 by 1 is 3. But when it came to 4 by 0, it said, oh, divide by 0 is not allowed. And the result of 4 by 0 is, because we said if it is not greater than 0, return a null, right? Which means it returned a null. It did not blow up. It did not blow. It provided us a warning and said, oh, I don't know, right? And let's see, probably 12. Yes, it is log 12, and it's a warning message. Okay, so the log test says divide by 0 is not null. What the line number it happened is 40. Oh shoot, it's not going to show up. Okay, line number it happened is 40. Client, these are all things that we know, and extra is empty, right? Okay, so it's the exact same thing. Okay, now we are going to the next one, saying, okay, what happens if there is a recursion in a function call, right? What happens if a function call within itself? How can we use the debugger, right? Not the debugger, I mean, how can we use the logger, right? Let's see an example. Okay, as usual, we initialize the context. Here we are turning on the debug, and when we say recursion, we use factorial. So factorial comes to mind, and here also it's factorial. So it's taking a number in as a parameter, and then it's saying, okay, when it is 0, return 1. If it is not 0, call yourself, right? It's calling itself. The reason we are doing debug is we don't have an info here. We said, okay, I want to see what's being logged by turning the debug on for the number, right? So it calls itself, bypassing itself until it's a 0, right? And finally it returns the factorial. So typically when it is a function, you cannot have the timer as the last statement, because if you have the return before that, it'll return and then you'll never get here. That's why the timer is before the return. And it's also, if you see, it's racing, right? Yeah, since it's going to race, I don't have to return if there is an exception. Okay, so we are going to go after factorial 3 and factorial 5 and print the result. And we have the debug on. Okay, it printed something. So if you remember, we passed 3 factorial. So the number is 3, number is 2, number is 1, number is 0, right? So those are the different loops it went through in the factorial. Then it goes to these are all within the debug thing, and then finally it says the result of 3 factorial is 6, right? And then number is 5 4 3 5 4 3 2 1, and then it says the result of 5 factorial is 120, right? So this is the recursion, and we set the debug to false and reset the context and look for the next like we are going back to the log table, app log table with our latest log, which is log 13, right? So what did log 13 do? Let's look. So log 13, so since it was going in recursion, you have 20 messages, right? 20 different messages for log 13. There are runtime, because for each number there is if you remember, the timer is also turned on with the debugger. So the numbers 3 3 3 2 1 0, and then for each number the runtime. Same way, numbers 5 4 3 2 1 0, and then for each number the runtime, right? So that's what you are seeing. So number 3, so if you go to a timer, you'll not have the okay, this is number 5, so I need to go to that runtime. It'll be empty, right? So we are debugging with the values being logged. This is recursion. So you can still use the logging mechanism. Okay, now that we have seen information, debug, warning, we will see the error, right? Now we are going to divide by 0 and raise an error. What happens, right? And we initialize the context. Okay, so it is the same divide and rule thing, but we are not doing any of the check or anything, right? Earlier, if you remember, we were saying if denominator equals 0, warn. We took that code out. We said, okay, exact same code, just let us see what happens with the same iteration, right? I going from 0 to 4, and denominator going from 4 to 0. And if you see, logs.error is by default is set to raise an exception. We'll see what happens if we run that. Okay, so it did raise an exception. Divisor is equal to 0. So it raised an exception. Before raising an exception, it printed our until it got to 3, right? When it came to 4, the denominator is 0. It said ow, and then said I am going to raise an exception. So reset the context, look for this client ID, which is 14, and this is of type error. So it says divisor is equal to 0. It happened in line 45. Line 45 is where it raised the exception, and the backtrace says, oh, go to line 41. The line 41 is where we did the division, right? Division. So because of this, it went to the line 45, right? And then the club should give you the parameter. So it says numerator is 4, denominator is 0, and the depth call stack should tell you the exact same thing, in as well as it goes to into, it started at 54, 45, and then 936, 98. The other one gave you 45 and 41. The 54 is from the anonymous block where the call was made, right? So 54 is this one where it made the call, and this call went into 45, and if you remember from the back trace, 45 led you to 41. Okay, so this is racing with an exception, right? Now same divide by 0, but let's not raise an error, instead see what happens, right? Okay, initialize the context, same thing, one changes, raise is false. If you're not going to raise, you have to return, right, since it's a function, right? So we are going to return null. Go through the same thing. So now you will see, oh, PLSQL procedure completed successfully, but there is no result for 4 by 0. You have the rest of them printed, right? Reset the context and look for the message for this particular client, which is 15. Okay, it's an error message. It's the same thing, right? Line number 45, it's going to go, if you see the backtrace, it's going to go to 41, and Coulam is going to give you the numerator and denominator where for which the error occurred, 4 and 0, and the call stack will take you from 54 to 45 to 55 to 45 to 936, which is the logs.error one, which takes you further down to the get call stack to 98, right? Which is also in the logs package. Okay. Okay. Tracing back. So we saw in the call stack, it's kind of from the caller, it goes to the called procedure, error line, and then within that it goes to the line where it happened. Now what if we have multiple procedures and or functions, and each one calls itself, and the error happened in one of the inner procedures? How do we trace it back, right? Let's try that one. Okay, initialize the context. Okay, so here you have 3 different procedures, right? 3 different procedures. A grandfather procedure, a father procedure, and a child procedure, right? A child function, a child function, a father function, and a grandfather function. So we have 2 variables, first name and inheritance. Inheritance is the number and first name is a string, right? And grandfather takes 2 parameters, level and first name. Same as the father, takes 2 parameters, level and the first name. Child has 3 parameters, savings, level and the first name, right? So what does the grandfather do? Grandfather says, okay, oh, this is divided by. Grandfather says, if the first name you're passing is A, I'm going to kill you, right? Return 1 by 0, which is going to raise an exception, divide by 0, right? Which means it'll go to the exception. Otherwise, if the name does not start with A, if it is level 1, I'll give you $10 million or $1 million. You need 1 million. Otherwise, I give you 2 million, right? If it level is 2 million, otherwise I don't give you anything. Father says, okay, if level is 1, I will call the grandfather with that level and the first name. Else, I'll give you 5 million or 500,000. I'll give you 500,000 as well. I'll call the grandfather and get you whatever he is going to give you. The child, he is going to say, okay, let me find how much I can get, right? He is including his savings and calling his father with his name, right? So if you see here, we don't raise at the child level, but at the father level and the grandfather level, it is a raise, right? Okay, the first one for the execution, what we are doing is we are passing the first name of Sampath for the father with the level of 1, right? Level 1, first name is Sampath. The second one is Krishna. The child, so the child, his savings, he has 12,121. He's level 2, and his first name is Krishna. The third one is Arjun. He's a child. He has a saving of 32,333, level 2, and his name is Arjun, right? Let's execute it and see what happens. All right. So Krishna, he gets 1 million from grandfather, right? From his father, but say grandfather, right? Not Krishna, Sampath. Krishna gets 2 million from grandfather and 500,000 from father, and he has a savings of 12,121. Whereas Arjun, since his first name is Arjun, he gets a divide by 0, right? Divisor is equal to 0. So it raises an exception, and he is kind of losing his inheritance or his savings as well, right? He did not get his father because we raised an exception all the way through. We did this to see that back trace. That's why we went two level deep, right? Okay, we reset the context. We look for this particular client. It is log 16. Okay, so it says divisor is equal to 0. Let's walk through here and see what it says. Okay, so I have 3 different error messages, right? Not one. So 3 different error messages. The 3 different error messages are because of the grandfather function, the father function, as well as the child function. So the first error happened in the grandfather function, right? That's where, if you see time wise, it happened in the grandfather function first. That's where the first raise happened, and it happened in line number 49. Let's see if we can walk through that. Line number 49. So this is where it raised, right? Line number 49. And the problem is divisor is equal to 0. So where did it originally happen? It happened in line number 34. So line number 34 is return 1 by 0. That's the grandfather doing, oh, if your name starts with A, I don't like you, right? That's what the grandfather is doing. And again, this is call stack is going to go from anonymous block. This is level 2 Arjun, and this is the call stack which is going to go anonymous call called child call father call grandfather, and the logs dot error and the call stack, right? It has the complete thing, right, with all the line numbers. Now going into the father, since he raised an exception, he gets the ORA 1476 along with ORA 2901, and it says, okay, it happened 49 and 81, right? 49 and 81. Okay, so 81 is, if you see, it's the father calling the grandfather function, and if you see the line number it happened is 86, right? He raised as well, so 86. So why did it happen? Because of him 81 calling line number 81 calling 81 getting it from 49. 49 is where grandfather raises an exception, and if you go to the grandfather, it is in 34, right? So you get it. Now going to the child, it's in line 122. So this is where the error message is logged. That's the line number here, 122, and If we go into the backtrace, okay, so at 119 and 86, right? What is 119 and 86? 119 is where he calls his father, and 86 is where that race happened, right? That's the race that happened here, right? And if you look into the 86, it will say, oh, it happened in line 81, right? So again, if you go to the right, it's going to have the club, which will have Arjun and level 2 and savings. Whereas for father, we don't pass the savings, we only pass the level 2 and Arjun. Okay, maybe I'm not recording it. Okay, for grandfather, it has it. And then the anonymous block. Oh, this is my bad. I did not do a logs.addPom for the father. That's why. Sorry, it's my bad. I should have added the logs.addPom. If I had added the logs.addPom, it will show in the father as well. So if you see, I'm doing the logs.addPom in the child as well as in the grandfather, but I missed it in the father function. That's my bad. Sorry. So now you kind of see how we can go in and in to figure out where the problem is. Okay, now we switch on. Okay, we have seen information, warning, debug, error. We switch on to Jira. Okay, this again, these Jira tickets will not be created for you even if you use RJ. It will not be created for you unless you work with the architecture support to monitor the app log. And when they monitor the app log, you may want to tell them, please, when you see Jira, start calling the API to create Jira tickets and assign to this particular group. So we will be alerted, right? Okay, so initialize the context. And okay, I'm using the same father, child, grandfather functions. And what the trick father is doing this time is he's saying, okay, I know what my dad is doing. Okay, he's saying, okay, I'll call grandfather function, but if it raises an exception, I will create a Jira ticket so somebody can go look, talk sense to him. It says this Tata is cheating. And race is false. I don't want to raise this error. Instead, let me return 0 so that whoever gets this ticket can go talk to the Tata meaning grandfather, and talk some sense to him so his son can get that $2 million, right? So let's run through this. So since there is no raise at the father level, so this guy gets 1 million. So Krishna gets 2,500,000 plus his savings, and Arjun gets 500,000 from his dad and 32,333. He doesn't have the grandfather inheritance, but somebody is going to talk to Tata, right? So if you see for Tata, the message that is provided is there, and the message code is Jira, right? Okay, reset the context. Let's look the message for this client ID, and the client, okay, this Tata is cheating, the message is there. Divisor is equal to 0, that's the problem. Log 17 is the client ID we are after, so let's put in log 17. Okay, so one is an error message that is at the grandfather block. If you see line number 49 going to line number 34, that's the grandfather block, and that is an error message. Whereas at the father level, it is not an error message. It is an error. Severity is error, but the message code is Jira message code, and with the message, this Tata is cheating. So somebody go talk to him, right? That's what this says, right? So again, you know about the backtrace trace, so you can walk through all those, right? Okay, that's Jira. Now we have seen a timestamp, string, same thing for date, right? Like you can log dates, you can log numbers, floating points, everything. What about PLSQL types, right? Like what about structures that are created by us instead of the basic data types that is provided? What can we do? Oh, we can log that too. So again, initialize the context. Okay, here we have okay, so here we have user defined types, address, so address line. So if you have multiple lines, so line number one, so you may say, okay, my address is da 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 in line one and da 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 in line two, and then you go to the city and the state and the zip and the country. So if you have all those, for the streets you provide multiple lines, but for the streets, for the city, county, state, you don't need that. So if you see, it's a record with number of lines for writing the street, and then that record is becoming a table, right, with all the street information, and then you add that to the address for the street, the city, county, state, and zip, right? That is the address. So here we are going to manage customer. We are introducing, again, IO is in-out parameter. So in-out, it's an integer. We are managing customer, meaning we are either going to add or update the customer, his first name, his last name, and his address, right? Address is record type because this address is of record type. So we are doing that. So this record has a table type, which is different, right? So this is a table type. So this is a record having a table type as one of the fields. Okay, managing a customer, and so how do we add that? So most of them are straightforward, right? IO customer. Since it is an IO field, we can say, oh, I can print that. If you provide me an customer ID, it's an update. If you don't provide a customer ID, it's an insert, right? That's why you have the IO customer ID. And then the first name, the last name, the city, county, state, and zip. Oh, where is the street? I thought one of the thing in the address is street, right? Yes, we are going to handle that. So we check if the street is not null and if there are lines in that street. If yes, we loop through that one by one and then say, okay, line number this is this line number and the street information is this for that line number, right? That's what. So this is the again LTT palms, but we are going into we are providing key value pairs. All we are doing is going in 2-level deep, right? We go into the address which is of table type by looping through, and within the table type we go to each record and say what is your value, right? And then we add them as parameters. So the key is going to be keep changing. If it is line 1, it's going to say 1, street 1, and then if it is the next record, it is going to say 2 and 2. So you have different keys with different values. And say this is where you decide, oh, if the customer is provided, I'm going to insert, if the customer is provided, I'm going to update. If the customer ID is not provided, I'm going to insert, right? This is your DML action. All we care about is how do we log the parameters, that's all. And if there is an error, I print it, right? Okay, now let's execute it. How do we do it? Okay, we have a customer ID, local variable, first name, local variable, last name, local variable, and then the record type of address, right? So customer ID for this one is null. So this is a new customer. His first name is Satish, last name is Ramakrishnan. His address is for street, for index 1, it's line number is 1, and for index 1, for the field street, 24 Dubai Kurkuttiru. For index 2, we assign the line number to be 2, and for index 2 for the street we say 18th cross Kori Nagar, and the city is Bengaluru, and the county is Mamanaru, the state is Karnataka, zip is 723813, right? So these are the values, and then we call the procedure, and then we have another customer. So here it is an update because he has a customer ID. Name is Rajpat. His last name is Rangadurai. He has only one line. So for index 1, line number is 1. His street is X24 Natham Pidicha Street. Address city is Ibandan. State is Oyo. Zip is 200. And we are updating this customer, right? We are not actually doing it. We are expecting those DML actions here, but that is the intent. But the main focus is on the logging. And again, if you see, I have commented out the debug, and I'm doing it as information. But typically, we don't want to do the logs.info. We want to do the logs.debug. Only if we want to look into the message, we turn the debug on. Okay, completed. Reset the context and look into the message. Okay, so I have all the details printed for me, right? So log 18. So I have to go to the extra field, and when I click on the extra field, okay, so customer ID is null, Satish first name, Ramakrishnan Bengaluru, Mamanaru Karnataka 723813, line number 1. So these are the different lines. Value, the street is 24 Dubai Kurukattere for line number 2, which is the street. Continuing is 18th cross Kori Nagar, right? And for Rajpat 4646, it's an update. Rajpat Rangadurai abandoned Mamanar County, Oyo State, zip is 200, 1 X24 Nathampudicha Street for 218th. Oh shoot, I should have reset. I should have set it line number these to null. It's carrying over some of the values from the previous one. I should have set it to null in the second one because it's a local variable. It's carrying the 18th cross Korinagar from the previous one and Mamanaru from the previous one. That's why Mamanaru and street number 2 are repeating. Sorry, I should have set it to null. I should have reinitialized and set it to null. Or I should have assigned null and then meaning reinitialize and then start assigning. That's my bad. But the point is to see user defined types can also be logged, right? That's the main point. Okay, what about user defined type objects, right? Can we do that? Okay, let's initialize the context. And okay, this is a long one too. Okay, so where does it start? Procedure is add account. Add account, it has supplier ID, sign-in type, all these are characters, right? And then comes the user defined types, right? These are the types that are compiled under e-commerce code schema, right? Person, contact, phone, address lines, customer, right? These are user defined types. And then you have string and then 2 out parameters, right? This is to add an account. So when you add an account, so if you see supplier ID is supplier ID, sign-in type is sign-in type. So all these are okay, right? These are straightforward. Then comes the person. So when you come to the person, you say, okay, this person dot first name. So the field in that person, the last name in that field, right? So it's also straightforward, right? Same with contacts, right? You go contact one dot dot, contact dot dot, contact dot, all those contacts, right? And phone type, same thing. So all these are good. And then you go to the address. What did you last time? Same thing, right? This address null. If not, what is the count? Is it greater than 0? Yes. If it is greater than 0, let us loop through it until I exhaust the count and print each count, right? I'm adding the parameter for each one so that I have the addresses, right? And then the customer type is again straightforward, right? Customer.type, customer.contact method is business owner. So it is, oh, this customer type dot the field in that thing, right? Key value pair. And again, I am doing a logs.info. And this is where you will do your normal action, meaning this is adding an account, which is creating a new customer. Okay, now into action. The action, what we do is, okay, we have, these are the straightforward ones, the strings, McLean, supplier is McLean, sign-in type is email, the sign-in value is, I'm going to sign in as me@nobody.com, email address I want my orders to go to is orders@nobody.com, and then I have the scalar types, right? Non-scalar types, right? L person, L contact, L phone, L ad, L address, L customer, and then the user is nobody. This is string, and these are the out parameters, customer ID and message. So I initialize the person object. So the first name is Donald, last name is Duck. I initialize the contact. I provide all the fields. I'm calling the constructor here. I'm initializing the phone, and when I come to the address, I initialize the address, and then since I have once I have to add that to the, because I could have multiple lines, I have to add it to the address table type, right? So if you see for address, I would have L address is address lines plural, whereas L add is line singular. So this is record type, this is table type. So I'm attaching the address to the record type and adding the record to the table type for the index, right? So if I have more, I'll say extend, and then index 2 is whatever the next initialization is, and it goes on. Then I initialize the customer and call the add account. Okay, let's run this through. It's complete. Reset the context and get the rows. Okay. So you see address is printed with the indexes. All the other things are also printed. So doing business as Donald's, Fane is this, address is this, B2B customer, member since this particular date. So everything is there, right? So log 19. Okay, so it's exactly the same thing laid out. So we can also use the type objects, right? Okay, so far when we said initialize, we provided a client, we had the IP, the host, the OS user, the app, right? There is another way to initialize as well, right? And that is set app code, right? This is the simpler initialization, right? With this, you don't have the control of the client ID. So far, I said, okay, since I have been assigning the client ID some value, I have been going after that. With this one, I don't have the control. So what happens to the client ID? It takes the host, I think, meaning it takes the computer name, the name of my computer, and puts it in the client ID. So let's look at that. So again, I'm going back to the square one where I was doing the logs.debug warn info error and rj, but this time with the simple initialization, right? So okay, this is printing it onto the screen. if you see, my client ID is my laptop address, right? This becomes my client ID. The rest of them are the same. So let me say or and look at the last 5 messages or so. Okay. So it starts with the warning, and since it's a simple initialization, my client ID, if you see, they are not the log messages anymore. They are my computer name, right? That's how it is being identified. Okay, the next one. Let us revisit the environmental parameters, right? If you remember, when we talked about environment, we had 14 different parameters, if I remember right. But we are not going to go after everything. We are going to go after one of them, but like let's revisit them. So I am picking the app code as ecom, database is ecom d1, and picking a random account, right? SVS Express. Okay, so there are 13 parameters. I thought 14. Okay, 11 rows. Okay, 11 rows. Okay, LDAP server, IO directory, IO file name. Okay, right? If you remember again, log targets screen equals Y, table equals Y, file equals no. Debug is off. These are for emails. This is for log directory where you want the log file to be, and the code directory, which is for writing files, right? Okay, why are we revisiting the parameters? We are going to go after one parameter, which is default log targets, and change it, right? We are going to change the value from screen equals Y to screen equals N. So we don't want to print it on the screen. The reason we are doing it is most of the times, like since we are, it is easy to read from the table one. Most of the times, if you're writing to the console and you're calling from Java, it's of no use, right? Like if you're writing to the console, you have to have the set server output on. So, and also we found out sometimes it goes in an infinite loop if it is a long string or something. So that's another reason to turn those off. So we are going to work with long strings. For that reason, in the next few cases, we are going to turn it off, sorry. So I'm going to update parameter screen equals Y, table equals Y, file equals N. To even update the framework tables, I need to set the context. Without setting the context, I cannot change the values. I set it up. Now I'm going to update for 13, 16, 19, and 10 to no, right? 4 rows updated, committed. Okay, we have reset the context that we set for making that change. Now we are okay. This is another thing, right? In SIGWMS and OP, we have been using this extended string size for maybe 10, 12 years now, right? Like we have been dealing with long strings. The default is in the table you can have only 4,000 characters, and then they provided this extended to go up to 32,767 characters, which matches the PLSQL max from 12.2, if I believe it, if I'm right? So we have been using it for some time, and we wanted the extended on the e-commerce databases as well. There is good and bad about it, right? Like the good is we can work with long strings. The bad is it writes it writes to the host to handle long strings, right? So that's how the clubs are also handled, so it's similar. But these days, even in the autonomous database instances, the default is extended. I see more up potential than down potential, and with the machines being faster, so I don't care about it writing to the host or anything, because I don't see drastic downgrade on the performance. So we set it to extended, which means my strings in the table can go up to 32,767. The reason we do that, it is not to store something. It is more because I have SQLs where I have long, like strings that are more than 4,000 characters long, that I can use or have it as a where clause to parse something, right? So those are the different cases. So we have it as extended. So now we are going to pass as parameters, and in here we are not going to deal anything with the tables. All we are doing is we turn off the parameters. We are going to just print the long string, right? That's it. Okay, we initialize the context, and if you see, it's a very long string, right? It's a very long string. This is the procedure, and the procedure is called long string. And again, I'm doing a logs.info here, some action after that, and I have defined it as 32,767. I have a long string, and then I'm passing that to the long strings procedure. Okay, and then I'm resetting the context and fetching the last line. So in the table, it only stores up to 4,000 characters. It does not. But on the one of our cloud instances, I have changed some of the variables to hold the values up to 32,000, because PLSQL, the starter framework was primarily built it was built for 4,000 characters. It was not built for 32K at all. Even though it handles CLOB and stuff, it was primarily built for string size to be 4,000 characters. So I have passed for some discussion, I have passed along some email asking the thought process among other folks for us to increase some of the field sizes from 4,000 to 32,000, right? For example, log text. I think this is Coulam, where we are storing the string, which goes up to 4 gig, I think. So there is not a problem in this extra field. It is more some other field. I was asking, what if we increase the size to be 32K, and I have not heard back on that yet. But that is one of the things that I want to go venture into later, right? Okay, anyway, so this is the string, and then what about passing clubs, right? Okay, same thing. We initialize the context. This is even much longer string, so it is comma and tilde separated. So comma for the rows and tilde for the fields. It's almost the same procedure, except the data type that is being passed is a club as opposed to a string. Oh, I forgot to show log 20. Okay, anyway, log 20. Oh, I have yes, Rajaji. Okay, we don't care about that. Okay, log 20 is the last one, and the club is the string, the long string, right? Okay, that's club 20. Okay, here it is club with much larger string, calling the same kind of call, making the same kind of call. Reset the client, and let's look at the string. So here it is. So we are after 21 now. Log 21. And here you go. That's the club. Okay, I'm going to update the parameters back from no to yes. So for that I have to set the context. I update it from no to yes for this environment. 4 rows updated, committed, reset the context, done, right? Okay, let's explore further, right? I'm going to show you how else you can play with the log table, app log table, right? So here I'm going to go after the routine name cart management pk dot add to cart, right? Cart management pk add to cart. So routine name is where here you'll mostly see anonymous block, but if it is a compile package or a procedure, you'll see the package.function, package.procedure, or the function or the procedure name here. So since it's we are doing most of the things from anonymous block, it's saying anonymous block. So but here in this particular case, I'm going after the app log for routine name cart management. Let's see what is in the extra column, right? What is there, right? This is a club. I'm converting into a string and printing it on the screen, right? So if you see, it has parameters, right? That particular procedure, when it is being called, it logs these parameters, right? Okay, what about if I want to join these to an existing table and compare the quantity and the sell price or something, right? Like how do I do that? I know it is a key value pair and it has parameters and keys and values, sometimes order null, sometimes there is order number. If it is order ID is null, it is not in the table. So it is not in the order table, right? Things like that. How do I check that? Okay, let's convert this using with the available tools in the SQL. Let's convert this into a JSON, and then from the JSON, let's see if we can transform it into rows and columns. Yes, we can. So now we have order ID, supplier ID, location ID, customer ID, location ID. Oh, I have a location ID repeated for some reason. Item ID, quantity, and sell price. So now you can join the order to the item, order an item, and compare the quantity and sell price, right? So you could do these kind of stuff, play with the log table and do all these kind of stuff. Okay, thank you for your time. I know this is a long video. Maybe some of you are already sleeping. Sorry about that. Hope you will have fun with the the starter framework, and anything that you explore and find and you enjoy, please do share with us so we can also learn from you guys. Thank you. Hello everyone. In the last video, the out parameter where we were capturing the cursor was not printing the result on the screen. So it was bothering me. So I thought I probably will have to supplement that with another video. So here it is, right? Again, I'm not going to be explaining, just this video is to show the cursor is being captured and you could see the result on the screen, right? Okay, so we initialize the context and this is the cursor. So if you remember, we have the app ID 4 and Jira as the default values. The rest of them are null, and we are going with the default and getting the cursor back by calling the get app log and putting it in the bind variable olist, and we are going to print the result. So this is what I was expecting in the last video, but for some reason it didn't want to cooperate. Okay, reset the context. Okay, now with the debug on, again it's the same exact cursor, only the parameters are changing. Instead of message code going with the default, we pass a null. If you remember, the default is Jira. The rest of the values we take the default with the app ID 4 and we are holding it in the bind variable O list and printing the result, right? Since there's a debug on, it's giving the runtime, if I remember correct, but we are not worried about that. But here is the result, right? Which is from the cursor. Again, the next variation where we have the client OS user as S Rajaji, and here is the result, which is printing on the screen. This time the timestamp. So we are passing the timestamp, looking for the last 1 hour, and here is the result. So this is the last 1 hour, right? So 12th March 11 p.m. right? So it's getting anything that is greater than that happened in the last 1 hour, right? Reset the context.